What is up, everybody? Welcome to this Trainwreck Sports Podcast, where we are here to pay the bills. It is Jake Micah, joined once again by my co-host Mike Bunt, presented by Outlet Liquor. Well, Mike, I guess Mike, you're technically presented on the podcast by Outlet Liquor, but this podcast is presented by Outlet Liquor, your place to buy a case in Western New York. It is May 2nd. I almost said March 2nd. May 2nd. May Day was yesterday. Mike's got the summer shirt on. He's willing the summer vibes into this. Mike, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk some Bills football. The draft last week, a lot going on with the receiver room. So there's a lot of fun topics to discuss tonight.
Yes, sir. We're going to get right into it. And the draft, listen, a lot of Bills fans were upset on Thursday night, me being one of them, about the Bills trading out of the first round, trading back and trading out of the first round. But you know what? It worked out perfectly for you and me, Mike. It worked out perfectly for this show, selfishly, because we got on here Friday night, we chopped it up, and the Bills took a pick in that second round right at the beginning. They picked Keon Coleman, number 33 overall, as the wide receiver. We're going to go deep into Coleman and everything else about this draft class. But there was a lot of other picks made. The Bills they didn't do as much wheeling and dealing, packaging up those picks to move up. They took a lot of guys. What was before we get into the wide receiver, because that's the wide receiver room is going to be a big topic of our show today. But before we get into that, what was your overall impression of the draft class in general once you finally saw it all put together from Brandon Beane there?
Yeah, I thought it was a solid class overall. Nothing spectacular. Nobody that instantly flashes at me as a superstar or someone that's going to be a huge impact player year one. But there's a lot of good players, a few guys that will start right away, in my opinion, and then a few guys that will have the opportunity to see the field. And then at the bottom end, a lot of depth slash special teams players. But I'm excited about this class overall. Obviously, Coleman right away slots as a starter. I think Cole Bishop, the safety out of Utah, has a chance to get a lot of playing time right away, if not start at safety. Ray Davis, I love him as a backup running back. You look at the center out of Georgia. Does he have a chance to challenge for some playing time on this team? And then obviously Dwayne Carter out of Duke. He's a plug-and-play defensive lineman, according to Brandon Beane. And even the guys later on in the draft, like I said, Ulofoshio, the linebacker out of Washington, does he have some talent, some ability to work his way up in time? Obviously a developmental prospect. A guy like Javon Solomon, defensive end out of Troy, one of the top sack producers in FBS college football in recent years. And then even Daquan Hardy, nickel corner out of Penn State, who some scouts think is one of the top nickel corners available in this draft. So
yeah, man.
Overall, I'm excited about this draft class. We'll see in time how it ends up turning out. But there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about it, even if they didn't double dip at receiver or get everyone's favorite wide receiver target after all these months of talking about that position first and foremost.
Yeah, man, you said it well there. My biggest impression was, as you said, no double dip and everything else, and they only picked Offensive tackle technically was the only position they double dipped at, but that includes Travis Clayton, the guy from the international program, who really is just, I mean, I'm assuming that they're going to put him at tackle and try him out there, but apparently just had one of the craziest workouts anybody's ever seen, and Brandon Bean couldn't pass that up. Peter Schrager was talking about, like, there were a couple of the draft guys, I think Daniel Jeremiah before the draft talked about how nuts his 15-minute workout was. But for me, the biggest impression was just they wanted to get younger everywhere, and they took it as the opportunity to not only address the glaring need they had at wide receiver and get younger there and get a guy that could potentially be paired with Josh Allen for the next 5-10 years, whatever it may be, but saw an opportunity to get talent and get value across the board for a team that last year was what I think they were the second or third oldest team in the league. And you can't sustain that for a long time. And Bean knew that. We're going to talk more about the 2024 year in general and how we see these guys contributing going forward. But for me, that was my biggest impression. Like, it wasn't just, you know what, we just need to address receiver and address this offense. Bean in the front office saw it as an opportunity to look at this team and be like, listen, let's just get talent everywhere to compete and come in. And like you said, like getting Van Pran Granger in the 5th round, like maybe he's just a depth guy eventually for them, but getting a guy like that could potentially compete for a position on this line, maybe this year or in the next couple of years. Saw a lot of breakdowns about him having a Mitch Morse profile, especially out in the run game and everything else. Like, just then moves like that where you can get the value and get potential contributors. That's what I like about the class. So like you said, not spectacular, but solid and addressed a lot of things that this team needed to address. And the biggest thing, getting younger and matching up with their timeline with Josh Allen.
Absolutely. And right now, the Bills are in what Tim Graham phrased in a recent podcast, a soft reset. It's a youth movement. There's no denying that this is a transition period for the Buffalo Bills. Now, don't freak out. That doesn't mean that they're suddenly going to be dropping off a cliff and not being a successful team going forward. I still think they're a playoff team. I still think that they have a chance to win the AFC East this year. But with all this youth coming in, replacing a bunch of notable veterans that have left this organization this offseason, there is a little bit of unknowns, and we're going to get to that later in the show. But it is also exciting to see this influx of young talent join the organization, and hopefully Sean McDermott can develop these guys into the next wave of guys that'll open up the second window of Josh Allen's career to try to win a title in Buffalo.
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree more. So let's get into some of our topics we've got for the show. That's our main impression of the draft class. But the big talk of the draft afterwards for the Bills was obviously the receiver room, only adding Keon Coleman. If you were following Twitter and following along closely during day, especially day 3 of the draft, every single pick, you just see every fan, content creator, everything else is like, all right, here's my 5 receivers that are still on the board. Like, go get one of these guys. And it just kept coming. The Bills were not taking those guys, filling them with other positions. Obviously only end up taking Coleman. So as the room looks now, you got Coleman, you got Curtis Samuel, you got Khalil Shakir, Mac Hollins, a lot of Justin Shorter talk again this week. KJ Hamler on that workout deal that he's got coming through. And I don't know, maybe we've talked about this, Mike, but I watch a lot of Penn State and Texas football. So big fan of the Daquan Hardy pickup. We'll talk about that later. But KJ Hamler still got faith in him if he can stay healthy to be a contributor. But looking at this Bills wide receiver room right now, how do you feel about it? Are you confident in the room that they have put together as of this moment on Thursday, May 2nd, not March 2nd?
Yeah, I'm confident in the room, but there's no doubt it's a thin wide receiver group right now. It's definitely not going to be ranked in the top half of wide receiver rooms across the NFL at the current moment. You lose guys like Diggs and Davis, you're going to have a drop-off if you don't replace them with experienced vets. And when the 2 guys that come in are guys like Curtis Samuel and Keon Coleman, you can't suddenly say, well, they've gotten better. I don't think anybody in their right mind would say that the Bills receiver room right now is better than what they were at this point last year. Now, that doesn't mean they won't be better come September, October, November on the field. I think they absolutely have the ability to go out there and produce at a high level. The issue you have right now is there's a lot of uncertainty. A guy like Coleman could go out there and he could end up having 50, 60 catches year one, and we'd be like, okay, he can ball. He's a solid player. Excited to see what he can do. But right now, we don't know what to expect from him year one. A guy like Khalil Shakir, who was the Bills' top receiver the last half of the season, there's a lot that he could project to do a lot of great things this year, but we don't know that he will do a lot of great things. Now, I'm a believer in him. I think he's going to be a very solid player for the Bills this season, but that's a leap of faith. He hasn't shown that he is that guy yet. And with Curtis Samuel, we know from his past, he's normally going to be a guy that's around 60 catches for between 600 to 700 yards. That's solid, but that's less production than what Gabe Davis was too. So, yeah, there's no doubt when you look at the receiver room that it's thin right now. It's probably a unit that most NFL executives would probably say is a bottom 5 unit in the NFL at that position right now. Now, I don't think it's going to play out that way. I think that they have shown a drastic change in philosophy and how they want to address the receiver room. And we could talk about this in 1 second, but you can look at some of the other names. KJ Hamler, that's an interesting one to me. Former second-round pick.
Yep.
Is dealt with a lot of injuries the last 3 years.
Never had a quarterback.
As a rookie, had 30 catches. And let's not forget, he was a second-round pick, 46 overall out of Penn State. Crazy part, he's only a year older than Xavier Legette. So
that's wild.
The dude's been in the NFL for 4 years, and he's a year older than the guy that all the Bills fans wanted in the first round. And then there's some other names. Obviously, the Bills also had a signing recently as well. So the room is thin, but that doesn't mean this is going to be the group that we see come September.
No, definitely not. And we'll talk about some potential ads that they could make later on. KJ Hamler had 900 yards his sophomore year at Penn State. Also a dynamic returner. And something that, I mean, this is a little off topic about the wide receiver room and everything else, and I wanted to touch on it in the draft class impressions. What being in his press conference, post press conference, really paying attention to this new kickoff. Talked about, I'm not going to try to say his name, Eddie, the linebacker from Washington. I'll get
that. That's at least how
there you go, Mike. There we go. I like to hear it. And Daquan Hardy too, who was an electric returner, averaged 15 yards a return last year. They're really paying attention to that. I feel like Hamler could have a role on this team in that regard as well. Maybe it's just an all Penn State return role. We've seen some did you see the thing about Justin Fields potentially returning kicks today? Teams are getting weird with their returns, but everything you said about the receiver room is true. Like, this is not going to be, when you see power rankings before the year on all the websites and everything else, the Bills are not going to have a top 10 receiver room. They might not have a top 15. They might be in the low 20s, like that. We might be looking at that, which is a far cry from the last couple of years when you had a perennial all-pro leading your receiver room. But think about some of the teams that have been very good in football the last couple of years in their receiving room. I mean, look at obviously the easy comparison is go to the Chiefs the last couple of years. Now, obviously, having Travis Kelce helps that out a little bit. And we've talked about it last week. We've talked about it actually at length when we're talking about who the Bills are going to pick, taking a wide receiver, everything else. Not saying Dalton Kincaid is the next Travis Kelce, but they're expecting a lot of production and expecting him to get a lot of targets this year. So that's one comparison that you can get with it. But if you look at that receiver room, people were dogging that receiver room all year last year. All year. You think about the times that they let them down in games. MVS, I think about that drop against the Eagles on Monday Night Football that cost them a game. Things like that. Thinking of a team like the Packers last year, who coming into the year, no one was saying great things about that young receiver room. And then you come out to the end of the year and you're like, wow, Packers have a lot of young, dynamic receivers. Now, the Bills aren't exactly in that same position because they just have like one recent high draft pick. Shakir is obviously a younger player who, like you said, a lot of people projecting him to be a main contributor, but we don't have any proof of that. We don't know for sure. We're hoping that it comes out that way. Same with Curtis Samuel, who you said, guy, perennial, 700 yards, maybe 40, 50 catches, best case scenario, but also had his best year with Joe Brady, and also is playing with the best quarterback of his young NFL career too. So maybe the projections can be higher, but if you look at it just from a talent standpoint, if you're looking at the Madden ratings when the game comes out, this is not going to be a room that's rated high in all those kinds of scenarios. So yeah, they're thin, but it seems to me like, and this is especially with the Ray Davis pick, especially with the way that Joe Brady used James Cook in the passing game. Now, I got a lot of I don't know about you when you were talking about the Ray Davis pick with friends and everything else over the last couple weekends, because everybody's like, oh, Ray Davis going to be the receiving back no matter what. And I know James Cook had some drop issues last year, but James Cook was electric in the passing game too. Like, I think they're going to deal with
people actually saying that.
I've had multiple conversations talking about Ray Davis being the main receiving back from people.
That's crazy.
Okay, like, I'm glad that we're on the same page here, because I'm like, you guys know that James Cook was like blowing people and getting wide open, right? Like just blowing past people and making plays and everything else.
Drops, and people like forget that James Cook was one of the leaders in all-purpose yards last year.
Yeah,
that's wild to me, man. I hadn't heard that, and I know Ray Davis is a good receiving back. Like, he had 7 receiving touchdowns last year at Kentucky and over 30 catches. So you take that out of a college running back any day, but James Cook is still the primary guy. That's interesting to me.
Well, Bills fans, they're easily scorned. That's if that's one thing we could say about it. That's
fair. And you know what? When you look at the receiving game, I think we're going back to a more traditional where you spread the wealth around. There's no more alpha on this team, and I think a lot of Bills fans forget that. Gabe Davis, despite he was a productive player on the Bills, but he was never an elite. He was a middle of the pack number 2 receiver. I at times thought he was an upper echelon number 2, but at the end of the day, that didn't end up being the case. Stephon Diggs, obviously one of the best receivers in football the last 4 years, but you're not going to replace Stephon Diggs with another guy of his quality most of the time. So when you look at the room, I'm honestly kind of fine with the 2 and 3 options with Samuel and Shakir, whoever ends up being which. They both can play out of the slot. I think Shakir can also go outside and make some plays. I expect both of those guys to be 55-plus receptions this year. I think a guy like Samuel, 55 to 60 catches, 700 yards. Shakir, no reason he can't be around 55, 60 catches for around 700, 800 yards. Both of those guys have the ability to do that. So I don't look at it as you need to replace 110 catches from Stephon Diggs. When we say that Keon Coleman's the number 1 receiver, no one's saying that like he's going to be the number 1 producing receiver on the Bills. He's going to be the number 1 boundary option unless they make a trade for one of these megastars like Ayuk or Debo or T. Higgins and the likes of them. Then you look at some of the depth. Just going through some of the other names that we'll be hearing. Justin Shorter, is he going to make the team? Is he going to be in the running for depth? I don't know. He didn't really show me a ton last year, but he was a draft pick. Bills might not want to give up on him this early. Look at a guy like Tyrell Shavers. There was a lot of hype with him in camp and the preseason last year. Does he have a chance to make the team? We go to Andy Isabella. Is he part of the conversation going forward? Mac Hollins, he's going to be most likely your number 4, your number 5 receiver. He's been talked about teaching Keon Coleman the ropes a little bit. KJ Hamler, I think under the radar, could be a guy that makes this team, especially with his vertical deep threat ability. We're talking about a guy that has been clocked at a 4.36 40 time. He claims he can run a 4.27 40. Everybody's asking, why didn't the Bills double dip for a vertical threat? I honestly wanted them to do that in the draft. Maybe they like what they have in house with KJ Hamler. Maybe they want to see how that pans out. Then you talk about Quintez Cephas, the former Lion, another guy with experience. So there are guys in this room that have NFL experience that have produced before. If you look at it as Keon's your 1, that Shakir and Samuel are your 2-3. The Bills last year really didn't utilize their 4 and 5 receivers much. And the fact that you have Dalton Kincaid, who will essentially act as your number one target on this team, and you still have Dawson Knox, who is very capable of having 25 to 35 receptions, and you have a running back like James Cook that can go out as a receiver and catch 35 plus balls, and you just drafted another running back that can be part of the passing game. You don't need to suddenly have these star receivers come in order to produce at that level. And I see the comment here by Victor. I want to pop that up.
Yep.
He says they're not thin. They have 9 receivers. They just don't have the big names that you want. Victor, I agree with that. It really depends on how you analyze the word thin. Now, if you say thin from a depth perspective, no, they're not thin. They have depth. They have guys 1, 2, 6, or 7 that are more than capable of being on this team and contributing. And when I'm referring to thin, when I'm saying yes to they're thin, I'm more so talking about the top end talent. How do they rate as wide receivers compared to other groups in the NFL? So yes, from the perspective you're saying here, Victor, I completely agree with you. They do have depth. Now, will they make another move to bring someone in? That is an interesting question. I know you wanted to talk about the June 1st cap later in the show. Let's get into that right now, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem.
I don't think they need to go after a guy like Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, a T. Higgins. I don't think it's necessary, to be honest with you. If you get one of those guys, you're dropping a Samuel or a Khalil Shakir down the pecking order to the point where they're not going to see the field much. I just think the Bills believe a lot in Khalil Shakir and that he's going to have basically a breakout season. They obviously brought in Curtis Samuel in free agency, so they believe in him. And then a Keon Coleman, I think they're going to slowly make him more of a priority in the offense. Obviously, he's going to probably start day one as the outside boundary receiver, but is he going to be the main target guy? Probably not right off the bat. But if you bring in a Brandon Ayuk, if you bring in a T. Higgins, a Deebo Samuel, you're dropping one of those guys down the ladder. I don't think the Bills want to do that at this point in time. And then secondly, you're going to have to pay those guys quite a bit of money. The Bills just did so much to clean up their cap situation this offseason, getting rid of so many veterans that they finally have a good, clear cap situation going forward. You get a Brandon Ayuk, you're going to have to give him $25+ million a year, probably close to $30 million plus. Is that what we want to do at this moment? Do we think that's the best use of money? Does Brandon Ayuk suddenly make the Bills a championship team? Maybe. But to me, I don't think $30 million for Brandon Ayuk is the smartest use of money when you just cleaned up so much of it this offseason. Now, if they trade for Brandon Ayuk, I'm not going to be upset. Completely fine. Because to me, that'll be telling me they're going all in. They want to still contend for a Super Bowl. But I am definitely not I definitely don't think it's a necessity to do that. If they do go for a receiver, in my opinion, it'll be for a mid-level guy. June 1st, maybe a vertical threat. Maybe they don't believe in a KJ Hamler. They've seen some stuff in OTAs or minicamp by that point to realize, okay, we have to bring in one of these free agents and get another vertical threat. But I don't believe they're going to be making a splash. Like I said, could be completely wrong, but I just don't see it in the cards. A guy like Coleman, you're not going to want him to go down the pecking order when you just invested number 33 overall pick in him. You want him to take the reins and develop into that number one receiver. You want Samuel to be that speed versatility option. You want Khalil Shakir to be that elusive Cole Beasley type, finding the holes in defenses. And then you can let your tight ends do their thing. And Kincaid, like the comment by Jamel right here, they're going to rely on Kincaid. I'm 100% with you.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
not a receiver in name, but he's going to get 90 catches this upcoming season. He's going to be a 1,000-yard guy down the line. So when you factor Kincaid into the passing game, when you factor James Cook into the passing game, I don't know if you really need a $30 million receiver when you already have 6 or 7 guys I just mentioned that are going to be part of the passing game. And who knows, they might even run the ball a little bit more going forward.
Yeah, and that could be the importance of having a Ray Davis added to this roster, because obviously, like, bringing Damian Harrison last year, they clearly had ideas that they were gonna use him a little bit more. Obviously, an unfortunate injury and everything else, and Cook blossoming was a huge bonus for this team. So maybe it is a run game, a run heavier offense with a full year under Joe Brady. But I'm with you, man. It doesn't feel like a big splashy move is coming post June 1 once that money comes in. Now, I'm Brandon Ayuk. I am a huge Brandon Ayuk fan. I have him on a lot of dynasty teams from the last couple of years, picking him up and keeping him around. I've loved that guy since he was one of my guys in his draft class that I really fell in love with. But I don't think that that's the right move for this team as of right now. Now, when you look at everything you said about them clearing out their cap space this year and kind of being set up, they're going to have a lot of cap space next year. And this receiver class next year, which could include Ayuk if he stays around and wants to go to free agency, could include T. Higgins. They could get him on an open market. Justin Jefferson is going to be a free agent potentially next year. CeeDee Lamb is going to potentially be a free agent next year. Stephon Diggs is going to be a free agent next year. Not saying that's likely, but he is going to be out there. Chris Godwin, Amari Cooper. Like, there's going to be guys out there that could be a bona fide number one. And if you go through a year and give Keon Coleman those reps as you said, quote unquote, number one, being the number one boundary receiver in this offense and everything else, and then bring someone in to support him after he gets those reps, that feels like the best plan to me. Like, be patient, have your minor reset year, and then go spend like crazy next year, because those guys are all going to be interested to come to the Bills if they have the money and to come play with Josh Allen. Like, that's what it is. But
yeah, and all the names, like, there's so many names. You might even be able to. Who knows how the market's going to work out? Obviously, they're all going to get the money, but some might fall through the cracks. So I like that idea the most. I don't want to just rush to pay another guy $30 million a year when you just got rid of a guy that was one of the highest paid receivers in football. To me, that just seems as if you're just trying to rush the process. You have
to give up an asset to do it.
Yeah, you're probably giving up at least a second-round pick, probably maybe a first-round pick to make it happen. The same people that are saying don't trade up for a Rome Odunze because you don't want to give up a first in the future are the ones that are saying go after Brandon Ayuk. I don't get that. Honestly, I would rather have a Rome Odunze than a Brandon Ayuk, because at least I have Rome Odunze on a rookie contract for 4 years before his fifth-year option kicks in.
Yep.
That's a cheap, economical value where you're going to get the production and you're going to get the salary cap benefit. When you're trading away a first-round pick for Brandon Ayuk, you just gave up your major asset and you're giving this wide receiver a ton of money that you can no longer use on other positions on your team. So not that I don't love the player. I love the player. If it was cheap, if it was economical, I'd be all for it. But to me, when I look at this team, I think they're just missing a vertical threat. And to be honest, we went after KJ. We talked about KJ Hamler. He might be the guy already that they're trying to see. Can he step up? Can he fill that role? And I'm not against that. Like I said, second round pick 4 years ago, runs a sub 4.40. Guy with a lot of talent out of Penn State. I'm interested to see what KJ Hamler can do. So I think this receiver room is going to surprise some people this upcoming season, not because of the individual talent that stands out, but more so the roles that they play. We mentioned on a previous show, it's more like a basketball lineup now.
Yeah.
Keon Coleman's your power forward. Khalil Shakir is your point guard. Curtis Samuel is your, I don't know, maybe a shooting guard. He's a versatile person that you put all over.
Matt Collins, a small forward. I like.
I don't think we have any. We don't have any centers on this team.
Maybe Dalton Kincaid. He can take center.
Yeah, maybe Dalton Kincaid can be the center. But and it's been a little frustrating, honestly, to hear some of the national narratives about the Bills receiver room and some of the things going on, especially from intelligent people from sites like Pro Football Focus. There's been some stuff I've heard on local radio that's been frustrating because a lot of people are saying it was a gamble for the Bills to trade down in the draft. You can say whatever you want about trading with Kansas City, whether that's dumb or not, to let one of your primary rivals be able to get the guy they want. But I know people are saying, well, the trades were pretty much even. The Bills didn't capitalize too much. Well, let's be real. The Bills traded down because they probably had a handful of guys that they had similar grades on at the receiver position, that they weren't worried about going to 32 or 33 about losing those guys. And they went from a 4th-round pick to a 3rd-round pick. You do that any day of the week if you have 3 or 4 guys available. And some people are like, well, what if Keon Coleman would have been selected? Well, then you go after Xavier Legette if Carolina takes Keon Coleman. And they still would have been fine. And
the fan base would have fallen in love with Legette just like they've fallen in love with Coleman, too. I guarantee that,
so much. Obviously, the Bills were open to the idea, or they were that confident making these trades that those guys weren't going to be taken. Let's be real. Like all the people saying, well, it was reckless. They could have lost their guy. Who didn't realize Kansas City was going to take Xavier Worthy when they traded up to 28? Like, who honestly didn't make that connection in their head? The Bills know. The Bills, maybe they don't know 100%, but they have enough experience and enough intelligence to put 1 and 1 together and realize Kansas City is probably looking for Xavier Worthy. Then when they make the trade with Carolina, let's be real. We all knew they were going after Legette. Legette practically told the entire world that Carolina told them they're taking him at 33 if he's still on the board. We knew it was going to be Legette. So the Bills obviously knew it was Legette too. So spare me the talk radio crap about them not knowing who the pick was going to be or what a risk it was. The Bills made – that's why they didn't get a ton of value back. They made 2 slight moves. They moved up slightly from 4th round to 3rd round, and then they got a 5th round pick. And they ended up getting the receiver they probably were going to go after anyway. Now, we can argue all about, did they take the right guy? Was it smart to go after Coleman when you could have gone after Worthy or you could have gone after Legette? Well, obviously they have their reasons. And
Mike, this is why this goes so well. This is why we have such a great time here, because my next question for you was going to be, now that we're a week later, how do you feel about Keon Coleman being the pick?
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with it because honestly, the Bills probably have their reasons why they wanted Keon Coleman. Who knows exactly why? Last year at this point, I was trying to tell people why Dalton Kincaid was a good pick, and I had talk radio at that point saying, how are the Bills going to utilize 2 tight ends when they already have Dawson Knox on this team? Like, come on, man. Like, this is not to insult talk radio. This is not to like talk down to fans that say these things. But come on, you think that Brandon Beane, after 100 days of scouting these guys after the season, let's be real, they're scouting these guys 365 per year every day. So it's not like they just were looking at these guys the last 3 months. They've been looking at these guys their entire college careers. It's not like Brandon Beane suddenly just decided, you know what? I want a guy that gets very little separation, that some people think is a 7th or 8th receiver in the draft, and we're going to take him to be Josh Allen's main weapon. No, they have their reasons. They've had their conversations with him. They've met with him one-on-one. They've scouted him at Florida State. I think the pick is – I'm a little intrigued by it. I am a little curious why they were so high on Coleman. Obviously, 6'3", has the size, great in contested catch situations. I am a little curious why they liked him more than guys like Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Legette. But I'm going to trust the general manager that's built this Bills team into a championship contender that has made the playoffs 6 out of last 7 years, 4 straight AFC East division titles. Like, you get a little bit of the benefit of the doubt when you have a resume and a track record of success. You get a little bit of benefit of the doubt when you were the one that drafted the quarterback that no one else believed in, number 7 overall. So Brandon Beane is no stranger to people questioning what he's doing. But as a general manager, you got to do what you trust and what you believe in. You can't do what the media tells you, because if the Bills did what the media told them to do, they would have had Josh Rosen as their quarterback in 2018. So The only parts I'm curious with Keon Coleman is a lot of the smarter football guys say his best spot to start would be in the big slot. Now that's something that you see a lot out of Dalton Kincaid. So it's clear the Bills did draft Keon Coleman to be an outside receiver. Now, are they going to move him around? Are they going to just have him be on the outside? I think even though Brandon Beane is a straight shooter a lot of times, I don't think he's just going to give away all of his plans for Keon Coleman. If Keon Coleman goes on the outside and then in training camp in the preseason, it looks like, God, this guy can't get any separation. Like, this looks bad. You could always move him around. Like, you could always switch things up. He has a good enough skill set to where if one thing doesn't work, try him out something else, somewhere else, and you can always do other things. Like what you decide to do May 2nd, you are not required to stay that way September 10th, October 20th, December 3rd. Like you can switch things up and evolve. So all I'll say is this about Keon. I'm not worried about the speed. The dude is an athlete. There's been a bunch of other NFL receivers with similar 40 times that have had great careers. You watch the tape. He's an athlete on the field. He's great with the ball in his hands. He can go up and make plays. And what is not being talked about enough about his time at Florida State, go through his game log. He was a good player the first 2 months of the year, got hurt. Then Jordan Travis goes down. And then the rest of the year was a wash. His numbers would have been a lot better had he not had an injury in early November and lost his starting quarterback. In that starting quarterback, too, let's be real. I know Jordan Travis finished 5th in the Heisman race and had 20 touchdown passes, only 2 interceptions. Jordan Travis is not the equivalent of some of these other top quarterback prospects. He's wild on a lot of his passes. People talk about how the contested opportunities, how it wasn't a higher rate. Yeah, because half of Jordan Travis's throws feels like it's a contested opportunity. Like when every time you go up for a ball, it's a contested opportunity. It's going to be tough to have incredible stats doing that. Just watch. All you have to do is watch a little bit of Keon Coleman to see this guy's a freak athlete. And Brandon Beane has always liked going after the freak athletes because he believes that this coaching staff can develop anybody. So not going to guarantee it works out, but I'm definitely intrigued by the pick.
Yeah, well said, man. And I think that something you touched on there is maybe, or you didn't touch on it, but something that I thought about as we're going with it. Maybe he's the guy because Josh Allen wanted him too over those guys too. Like, I don't know how much Josh factors into this, but we know that he has some kind of say and some kind of opinion into the process. And maybe it was a guy that Allen, the type of receiver that Allen hasn't been able to really play with. Everybody's like, oh, well, Allen hasn't been successful with those types of guys. This is the highest caliber of this type of receiver that will be on a team with Josh Allen. And yes, he's done well in the past with separators and guys that could get wide open if we're talking about a Cole Beasley or a John Brown. But even 4 years ago, Josh Allen is a much different Josh Allen than it is today. It's a different offense that you would assume it's going to be running. So I think that that's the hypocritical thing from some people in the fan base, because if you believe in Josh Allen as a quarterback, you believe he's the second best quarterback in the league, that he can make these receivers better, and that this room is going to be fine because Josh Allen can elevate the receiver room, then you got to have faith that he's going to be able to elevate a guy like Keon Coleman with the amount of the skill set that he's going to have. You can't have it both ways. You can't
100%.
You can't do it. You got to believe in the guy full out. And that's where I'm at with it. Like if Josh thinks it can work with him and we know the skill set that Coleman has, let's see it. Let's go out there and ride with it, because the guy has a crazy, like, regardless of what you think about the speed and the separation and everything else, he has a crazy skill set, an amazing athleticism, and clearly a work ethic and that's what the Bills wanted, a guy with character and a guy who's going to go put in the work. He's going to get better. It's not like this is the finished version of Keon Coleman right now. So I'm excited about the potential.
100%. And you hit the nail in the coffin. You can't be like, oh, Josh can make any wide receiver good, and then they draft the receiver you don't want and be like, oh my God, like what's going to happen? Like this guy isn't good. We got this bad guy. You just said we could take Javon Baker and turn him into an all-pro, but now Keon Coleman, who goes 2 rounds before him, is not. Like,
yeah.
It's you got Josh Allen as your quarterback. You can make it work. And I get frustrated because, like you said, the same thing. The whole Josh has only had success with separators. Well, he's had separators basically his entire career outside of his rookie season. So are we going to assume Josh is the same quarterback he was as a rookie? Maybe things have changed that have changed the way Josh Allen wants to play football. And I've heard this point too. Football has changed a lot over the last 4 years. The Bills were a team that used to go over the top. That when they had these separators worked because the teams weren't doing the too high safety looks yet. You had explosive plays. There's data that shows that all that stuff has gone down dramatically in recent years. So you got new rules about the tackling with the hip drop. So it's going to be tougher for these corners and these DBs to take down bigger players like Dalton Kincaid, like Keon Coleman, who are bigger players overall. And then secondly, last year we saw the Bills have to adjust to a team that goes on these longer drives that take more time off the clock. You have to run the ball a little bit more. Well, think about what they're doing right now. The fact that now they know they need to go on these longer drives, they now have big physical receivers in Coleman and Kincaid that can be more possession type guys where you have a 3rd and 5. You might need to just force it into them and just hope they block their guy out and they make a catch, that they go up and they grab it. Sometimes in football, you got to do that. So, yeah, I would have been excited about some of the other guys that would have been available, like Xavier Worthy or Xavier Legette, even a guy like Ladd McConkey. But to say that any of those guys come in and would have an immediate impact much higher than the Keon Coleman, I think that's just a false narrative. Now, those guys will all produce in their offenses. Xavier Worthy with Mahomes in Kansas City, that's probably going to be a nice combination for them. But Kansas City has missed on a lot of their guys too. A lot of people wanted Sky Moore in Buffalo. What has Sky Moore done in Kansas City? They go after the Giants receiver, who's a former first-round pick. How has that turned out for them? Not too bright. So, like, good for Kansas City making their moves. Good for Carolina getting their guy. But it's entirely possible that the Bills feel as highly about Coleman, if not higher, than those teams how those teams feel about those guys. So we'll see how it plays out. But I do think this is the Bills kind of, in a way, saying we need to change our offense and have more different, unique, complementary players on the field at the same time. We can't just have 3 guys that have the same characteristics or qualities. We need the elusive guy. We need the speedster. We need the big physical guy, and then still have the rushing element from a James Cook. And honestly, then Dalton Kincaid at tight end. So to me, I'm encouraged by this all because I do think this is Brandon Beane saying we do need to make some changes and we do need to adapt with this roster as Josh Allen continues to get older and evolve in his career.
Yeah, for sure. So transitioning off of Coleman a little bit to wrap up the post-June 1 conversation with the receivers, the names out there right now. Tyler Boyd just signed today with the Tennessee Titans. So you got Odell Beckham, Zay Jones recently released, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Mecole Hardman, Corey Davis, DJ Chark, Allen Robinson. Do any of those names sound like guys that you want the Bills to kind of bring in, or do you expect them to bring in? I feel like personally, if I expect like for something that they might want in the room, maybe an MVS as that speed guy to come compete with like a Hamler or something like that. Maybe Odell, finally, after 2 years of rumors, he comes in and he's kind of the vet of this room and the comes in as like the reliable option. Are there any of those guys that like you'd be banging on the drum for them to go after, you'd be okay with, or would you rather just have them stand pat with this room?
I really don't have a preference. I know that's not going to be the popular answer, but I was all about double dipping in this draft because the perceived depth of the receiver position, there seemed like there was a bunch of vertical guys that you could have gotten at the end of day 2, early day 3. The Bills didn't think it was necessary, and that's for a cost-controlled rookie that you could develop. So to me, I don't know if the Bills see the receiver position as much as a as a negative. I really don't know if they look at it the same way a lot of outsiders look at it. Now we'll see post June 1st. If they end up making a move for like Ayuk or T. Higgins, then we'll know, okay, it was all about waiting for Trey White's cap hit to no longer be on the table. But if they don't end up making a move June 1st, it's potential that that they just feel confident with the guys that they have right now. As I said, I'm okay if they go after any of those names. I don't think it's a necessity. We sometimes we get obsessed with needing 5 million receivers that we've heard of on a team, and we kind of forget that some of these guys that are available in early May, they might be only slightly better, if not worse, than the guys that are already the
Great
fourth,
point.
fifth, sixth options on the Bills right now. Just because the guys on the team aren't the biggest names doesn't mean that they're any worse than some of these guys that are available. So how much does an Allen Robinson have left in the tank? How much do some of these other guys have left out there? Who knows? But I'm okay either way. I don't need to see a move by the Bills. I'm fine with the 1 through 3, and I do think some of the other options are workable. If they didn't have a tight end like Dalton Kincaid, probably would feel much different. But because you have a Kincaid, because you have a running back that's able to go run routes and catch passes as a wideout, I feel less pressing to making a major move.
Yeah, I honestly agree about the receiver room. I'd rather have them go after an edge with that money, whether it's Yannick Ngakoue, Jerry Hughes still out there. Maybe bring him back. I don't think they need all 10 million for that, but I'd rather have them go get depth at that position and spend there like they did with Leonard Floyd and shore that up, because I do have faith in this room. It's not even just the room in general. It's the Kincaid and Cook factor, because I feel like those two guys, the sky's the limit for the production that they can have this year with what we saw from them last year. And I'm very confident that they're going to have, well, I'm confident that Kincaid's going to have even more targets and more productive year. And I'm confident that Cook can be just as productive, if not more. I guess it'd be hard to press to say more with the stats that he ended up with last year, but the way that they can contribute, and then the aggregate of that wide receiver room, I feel very good. And like we talked about a couple minutes ago, Josh Allen at quarterback, feel good about that no matter what, man. Like no matter what. So let's get into the last couple things we're going to talk about here beyond Keon Coleman. We've talked a lot about Keon Coleman tonight. With the rest of the draft class, who do you think is going to be the biggest contributor this year and beyond? Like, who do you think has the best future with the Bills, and also who do you think you contribute right away?
Yeah, so my couple of my favorite players in this draft class outside of Keon Coleman, love Cole Bishop. That's the guy right away is contributing on this team. He feels comfortable going into the box, making plays. He can make booming hits, has the ability to cover tight ends. That's the starting safety of the team going forward. Year one, day one, who knows? But he's going to be seeing the field regardless this year, and he's going to be one of the starting safeties on this team in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second guy I'm very confident in is Ray Davis.
Yes.
Ray Davis was very good at Kentucky last year. Set a school record, 21 touchdowns, 14 on the ground, 7 in the air. He is not really the best vision in the world, but he does have the ability to be elusive, break tackles. You watch his Kentucky highlights, you think that the dude is one of the quickest guys in the world with some of the moves and touchdowns he has, but he's actually more known as a physical, powerful back, 5'8", 215, around that measurable wise. So Ray Davis is somebody I think will have an impact on the Buffalo Bills going forward. So if you're asking two guys that aren't Keon Coleman, who I'm excited for, it would be Davis and it'd be Cole Bishop, and I expect both of them to contribute right away. Also, Dwayne Carter, like that's a guy that's going to see the field, has some pass rushing ability, and then beyond that, if you're talking day 3 guys, it's kind of you're guessing.
Yeah,
I like taking a chance on Javon Solomon out of Troy.
I love it, man.
Yeah, anytime you get a guy that's had 31.5 sacks over his last 3 college seasons, that's a guy worth taking a chance. Edifwan Uloofio.
Nice.
Yeah, I had his name the first time, and that wasn't great this time. But he was a third-team AP All-American. He has some potential. Obviously, Daquan Hardy. Excited to see what he can bring to the table. There's a lot of guys that can flash, and then the Georgia center, obviously, could he be a potential starter in the near future? Some people think so. So there's a lot of guys in this class to look out for. Who will hit, who won't, we'll have to wait and see. But I'm intrigued about a lot of the guys in this class.
Yeah, man. I'll bring up the comment here quick. It's off topic, yeah. But Justin Shorter's comment 40 time 4.55. That's what I found from my quick Google search. So very similar to.
He's a vertical threat too. I mean, not the fastest guy, but you watch what he did at Florida. He was a guy that went deep a lot. So you don't need to be a 4.35 guy to be a vertical threat. I heard on the radio earlier that the Bills really haven't had an explosive player in recent years, and I kind of paused for a second. What was Gabe Davis?
Yeah, right.
Gabe Davis had a 98-yard touchdown and a 60-plus yard touchdown in the same game against Pittsburgh. He had 4 touchdowns against Kansas City. He might not have been consistent, but Gabe Davis had a bunch of bombs throughout his career. I think I'm not high on Justin Shorter, but I'm willing to give him this training camp to prove me wrong. And maybe he is in the conversation. Maybe the Bills do think higher of him than what many of us as fans believe.
And what they used a 5th rounder on him last year.
Yeah, that's a quality pick.
Yeah,
Khalil Shakir was a 5th rounder. Not many people said much about him after year 1, and then now look at him. So maybe Justin Shorter is a sneaky surprise option in the Bills receiver room this year.
And I think it's just good practice as a front office to not give up on those guys right away. Like, he was hurt a lot of last year, and if you think that they have anything from him, don't give up on him that easy. Like, it's not going to hurt for him to come into camp and compete and maybe be on the practice squad for another year. And if someone nabs him up, if he ends up on the practice squad, whatever, it happens. But if you have a guy and you have some belief in him, don't give up on him after year 1. Like, give him that year 2. Let him try to develop. I know with receivers, if they're not producing like in year 1, it's a harder track to become a contributor, a consistent contributor in the NFL. But hey, let's see what he can do if he's healthy and can get on the field. And he's got, like you said, the physical frame, and maybe it works out. So yeah, biggest contributor beyond that, I was going to go with Dwayne Carter. We talked about it before the picks last week. I wanted a big guy. I was really excited about the potential of them picking a big defensive lineman in the middle, and Dwayne Carter fits that bill perfectly. A guy that produced a lot for Duke. Great kid. If there's an 8-minute video that Duke shared right after he got drafted, go out of your way to spend the 8 minutes to watch it. You'll fall in love with the guy. He's a great kid, hard worker, was a captain, I think, for 4 years at Duke, which is crazy, like, to hear. Like, that's the other thing about this draft class. The Bills picked a lot of leaders, a lot of guys that were team captains, a lot of good character guys in this group. Van Pran Granger, I love that pick just to get another guy at the center position that you can develop, because the center position is so important, especially with Josh Allen. Josh Allen's basically had Mitch Morse his whole career, so it's going to be a transition to McGovern this year. And maybe Van Pran, maybe he shows up in camp and shows out and really, really can take that job. I don't know about that, but hey, there's a guy that the Bills let go of a couple years ago, and everybody gets down on Brandon Beane for it, a Wyatt Teller, who was a late-round interior guy. So I'm just hoping that this is the makeup for it. And then I would talk about Daquan Hardy a little bit later on. With Brandon Beane has put a lot of emphasis on that new return in that press conference. He mentioned it for Eddie, the linebacker, saying how he thinks that he can be a great special teams contributor and a guy who on that new kickoff can shed tackles and everything else. Daquan Hardy was a great returner last year, in the last couple of years for Penn State. Mind you, not even talking about the fact that you said earlier, he's been mentioned as maybe one of the better, if not the best, slot corners in this class. And who's a better guy to learn from to play slot cornerback than Taron Johnson right now? But as a returner, kick returner last year, he averaged 19 yards a return. He had 2 punt returns for a touchdown, averaged 15 yards a punt return. the Bills have not really had a dynamic punt returner or kick returner in the last couple years. I feel like Hardy can be that role and win that role. And it's going to, from a high level full league thing, it's going to be really interesting to see which teams put the emphasis on the new kickoff and which teams kind of just are like, we'll do whatever we need to do with it. It feels like the Bills are putting a lot of emphasis on it and going to try to use it as a weapon. So I'm interested to see how they use those guys going forward and how they kind of set it up that way. And Hardy can be an important piece to that. But yeah, it feels like there's like the class, it's not a flashy class, but it could be a deep class. And it could be a lot of guys that keep that. Maybe they aren't stars on this team, but have important roles on this team, especially from the special teams perspective, where we know the Bills value that. When you're talking about a Tyler Matakevich the last couple of years or Saron Neal the last couple of years, and it feels like they drafted guys that can kind of fill into those spots over the next couple of years. So I'm excited about the class in general outside of Coleman. The last topic we have to have here, we have the roster almost complete. We know there's going to be some moves here and there, but this is basically the roster we're going into this with the season right now. As we look at it, I led the Athletics power rankings the other day. They had the Bills at 10th in the league. Are the Bills vulnerable in 2024 in the AFC East? In the conference?
They are vulnerable. And
okay.
That doesn't mean that they won't be great again. That doesn't mean they won't make the playoffs and that they can't make a run. Vulnerable only really means could they fall apart a little bit? And yes, they could fall apart if things don't go well with these offensive weapons and the defense with some of these youngsters taking over spots don't play up to their potential and expectations of the coaching staff. Now, I still have the Bills winning the AFC East. I still think at this moment in time, I'm going to wait till the schedule to make an official prediction. But at the moment, I would still put them at around 11 wins with Josh Allen, with the guys they have on this team. They still look like an 11-win squad to me. But are they vulnerable? Definitely more so than they've been since 2019. I wouldn't even call them vulnerable in 2019 because people didn't have expectations going into that season. So I will say out of the Josh Allen MVP, Pro Bowl Josh Allen era that started in 2020, this is the most vulnerable that they've been because at the boundary receiver, you're starting an unproven rookie. Your number 2 receiver, it's either Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir. Either way, you have a person that hasn't produced at the level Gabe Davis has produced. So you have 2 people that are downgrades from what you've had last year from a previous statistical measure. I'm not saying they're not going to produce at high levels. And then Khalil Shakir, love him as a prospect, unproven. And as we mentioned, the guys behind them, Mac Hollins, some of the Justin Shorter, KJ Hamler, there's a lot of unknowns in this receiver room right now. So while I have the confidence in Brandon Beane that it will come together, it could take time. And if it takes too much time, that could lead to issues. Obviously, I believe that Josh Allen is going to make it work. When you have a quarterback like Josh, he's going to will them through it. They're going to find a way to win. Even when Kansas City was struggling offensively last year, they had their defense carry them. That's what the Bills might need. Now, that's why they have a little vulnerability. While Kansas City's defense carried the Chiefs last year when Mahomes and their offense was struggling early in the season, they only scored around 22 points a game. Ask yourself this. If the Bills had a drop to around like 22 points a game, what do you think their record would be this year? I could see an 8-win team, a 9-win team if they scored 22 points a game. The Chiefs still had the third best record in the third seed in the AFC. Why? Because their defense was dominant. Now, with McDermott, typically the Bills' defense, even if you're losing guys, is still going to be pretty damn good. The issue is right now you have 2 new starting safeties. Trey White is gone. I understand he's been gone since early last year, but you have 2 new starting safeties. You have Rasul with Christian Benford. That should be good at corner. You have questions about the linebacker position. Will Matt Milano be the same version of himself when he comes back on the field? You have some depth concerns at D end and D tackle. Yeah, you got Epineza back, and you have Greg Rousseau. Like that looks like a good starting DN combo. But is Von Miller going to produce anything as a backup this year? I don't know. Then at D tackle, you got Daquan and Ed Oliver. That's nice on paper, but are these free agent additions? Is rookie Dwayne Carter going to add much at that spot? The Bills defense has more holes on it than we're accustomed to seeing, and they don't necessarily have a ton of depth behind it, which makes it concerning. Now, the one position, ironically, that they have more depth than ever is linebacker, which is obviously a response to what happened last year. Now you got Bernard, you got Milano behind that. You have Nicholas Morrow, you have Deion Jones, you have Balin Spector, you have Edafwan. Oh my God, I had it right.
Yeah, you were close. You were close.
At linebacker. Now you got linebacker depth, but yes, they're absolutely vulnerable because a few injuries to the wrong guys, and it could be a tough season. That said, I'm still picking playoffs. I'm still picking division championship. I know the Dolphins are tough. I know the Jets might be tough, and that adds to the vulnerability as well. But you know what those teams don't have? They don't got Josh Allen. They don't have a Josh Allen. So as long as Josh Allen is the Bills starting quarterback, I might say stuff like they're vulnerable, but you better show me that they're vulnerable before I actually believe they're vulnerable. So I should have learned my lesson after they were 6-6 last year. I didn't. This Bills team is still good. They're still rolling. They're still one of the top teams in the NFL. 10th in the power rankings. Let them be 10th. They're going to be way better than that once September hits.
All right. I love to hear it. We got a comment here. With the attitude some of these rookies got, the way they're talking, I believe they're not vulnerable. Actions speak louder than words. I like some of the defensive players they picked. That's the kind of attitude I like, Michael. That's the optimism that this fan base needs. And I think that you're sharing that optimism too, Mike. I really do. Because, they're more vulnerable than they've been in years past, for sure. But as you said, Josh Allen's quarterback, great equalizer. If he's doing things that he can do, this is a team that is going to be dangerous in the division, in the league, everything else. I'm bullish. I'm more bullish, I think, on the defensive side than you are. There are holes. The safety position worries me a little bit, but like you said, Sean McDermott's been able to put together some damn good defenses and put together some damn good defensive game plans with beat up defenses the last couple of years where they went into games with a lot of guys injured. You're like, man, what's going to happen? And those guys balled out. I'm very excited for Matt Milano coming back to pair up with Terrell Bernard after the development we saw from him last year. I still have a little more hope for Von Miller coming.
I do too. I know it's hard. I do too. I think he could still be a 6-7 sack guy this year. That extra offseason could make a difference.
Yeah, man. It's ACL seems to be a 2-year injury nowadays. So I feel like coming back off of that another year might be something that helps him out. I feel good. I really do feel good about the Bills going into this season. I'm still going to feel good when the time comes around. And you said as they were 6-6, like maybe, even at that point where they feel vulnerable then, but you still were confident in them. I wrote an article on Trainwreck Sports after the Giants game, and I said, hey, Bills are in an identity crisis. Like, that's what this team feels like. It feels like they don't know who they are. They don't know what they're trying to do. And they spiraled even beyond that after that point and then figured it out. I know the identity of this Bills team. It's Josh Allen. Like, Josh Allen is the identity of this team. He's going to be this is the first year that, he's been the leader of this team, everything else, but with Diggs around everything, at least I knew you were optimistic, Michael. I knew that you were feeling good about it. And that's I could see it too. It would not surprise me if 13 wins. We got another comment. Bills by 24, 12-5. Wouldn't surprise me if this team ends up that high in the standings this year at all. And I think it comes down to how good Allen is and how much he has so much on his plate every game of the year, the last couple of years as it is, that yes, maybe the talent on paper, there's a disparity from past Bills teams, but maybe he can elevate them above all these teams still because of how good he is. I don't know if we've seen the best version of Josh Allen yet. And that's scary to think about for the rest of the league, honestly, too. So it's belief in Allen and the identity that they're going to go with him. It's a belief in McDermott who, for all his faults and all the complaints that you'll see from people on social media and everything else, has always been able to put together a damn good defense, and the belief that getting younger was the right thing to do this year, even if it's a reset, even if this is the worst team on paper that they've had in the last couple of years and they'll have going forward. I still think that could be a deadly team in the AFC. And I guarantee you AFC teams aren't going to be excited when the Bills are up on their schedule regardless. That's for sure. And that's what you got to look at more than anything else, is what the other teams are thinking about the Bills. And I imagine they're not going to look at the Bills like a sweet matchup once that schedule comes out next week. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody's looking at the Bills as, oh, this is a game we can get a W. No one's looking at Josh Allen saying, oh, I'm glad we're playing Josh Allen and the Bills this week. No, they're saying that's going to be a tough one. That's going to be a tough one. So, yeah, fan bases can talk smack. Media members can say whatever they want. Data scientists can show whatever data. All I know is the last 4 years, the Bills have the second most wins in the NFL. And if it wasn't for the Chiefs, they probably would have been the team of the last half decade.
Yes.
But that's how it falls sometimes. So I do think as long as Josh Allen is leading the way, there's no reason to doubt this franchise. And I'm still as optimistic as ever about the future of this team.
I could not agree more, Mike. And we'll leave it here with Michael, who's saying he likes Coleman, likes Cole Bishop, thinks he's going to be pretty good. We agree. We're pretty big. I didn't talk about Cole Bishop that much on this show. Very excited about that Cole Bishop pick when it came in. Think that he's going to have a big role on this team. Even if he's not starting, I think he'll be on the field a lot. Some 3 safety sets, maybe some big nickel and everything else that they could do, put him on the field there. And watch it. We'll get the name down.
Edifon Ulafosio.
Let's go.
I did it.
Let's go. And with that said, we paid the bills. For Mike Bond, this is Jake Micah. Go Bills. Have a great night, folks.